the one source, Sports Card Nation. The hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 363 of Sports Card Nation. Joined by my good friend today as our guest on the show, Tony De Marzio. And we're kind of, this episode being part one, and next week's episode will be part two. We kind of do the year-end roundup and kind of go through the gamut of things that happened throughout the hobby year, if you will, and kind of weigh in, give our thoughts and opinions on, what happened, what we think happens because of it, and that sort of thing. And Tony's a smart guy, and, when I had him on, I said, well, what are we going to talk about? And he's like, hey, let's wrap, it's November. Let's wrap this year up and kind of put a bow tie on it. So today is part one of that, and then next week part two. And we don't beat around the bush. We don't mince words, and we kind of put some stuff out there. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as me and Tony did having it. Before we get these shows started, want to thank, as always, our great sponsors that make this show possible. Iron Sports Card, Rob taking your bulk submissions for SGC and PSA. Sports Collectors Digest, getting the right for them has been a lot of fun, and continuing to do so, and to highlight some people with my Hobby is the People column. It's been very blessed to do that. Hobby Hotline, we keep it going. We're on the For Collectors network now, and Upper Deck. They let me preview some products and do some reviews on them, and give some stuff away to you folks. So that's always good. So with that being said, let's get the show started. All right, always happy to have the next gentleman on the program here on Sports Card Nation. And today we're going to kind of wrap up the year as we're into November here, coming down the home stretch towards Christmas and the holiday season. But, two guys that kind of tell it like it is. I like to think so. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll be all over the board with today's conversation, just kind of talking about different things in the hobby and sort of wrapping up the year that was, if you will. But glad to be joined by my good friend, Tony De Marzio. Tony, as always, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, John. And I'm pumped up after that intro. It always gets me.
There you go. It's like a football, like the coach gives a big speech and you run out there and, we'll see what happens. But no, here we are, coming down the home stretch, like I said. And I mean, there's so many different places we can start off. Let's start off with grading, the grading terrain, Tony. And again, take this wherever you will. Sort of what I do with SGC as a bulk subber. We don't have to rehash everything going on there. PSA has kind of moved into SGC locations as well. Some of the subs are down on the SGC side. PSA's got its own dilemmas with different things and whatnot. And then you're someone that owns graded cards, has cards graded, just where, weigh in here on where do you see, grading and what's going on in that space.
Yeah. So with grading, I consider we're at a point now where it's collectors acquiring SGC and post. And I'm comparing how it was before and now. And I think I'm in a dilemma with my son that I think a lot of other hobbyists are having. He has a stack of cards with me that we combined, and we need to get it graded. And we don't have that SGC option anymore for the ultra modern and even the vintage because it just takes too long. And so that gives us CGC, Beckett and PSA. And the problem with PSA is that, the cost went up, the delays are there. So he doesn't want to send the cards there because he wants to get the cards, you know, in a couple weeks, like what we were used to. And if you pay for the expedited service, then, chances are you would have it shipped door to door, graded within a week. So, it's tough. And then on top of that, my son and I and many others were worried about, the quality of the grading. We're spending money on these cards, especially a 16-year-old. And when you get the cards back and you got to submit them a couple times to get the grades you think that they're worth, that they deserve, it's a frustrating experience. And then on top of that, we all see that we get our cards, we buy cards, and there are certain grades. And then, you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, other social media, you get an auction catalog, and you see all these PSA 8s, 9s, and 10s that were graded 20 years ago, 30 years ago, some even 10 years ago. You can tell by the certs, and they're inferior cards. And what's really frustrating for some of us is you see these old certificate cards in newer slabs. So they went through the reholdering process, and you're wondering, like, geez, recently there was a 52 tops Jackie Robinson PSA 8 sold for I think $140,000 in 2021 or 2022. Another auction house gets it, sells for $108,000, give or take. Then a private sale happens right before the 2024 Cleveland National, or right after, and person buys it. It's clearly trimmed on the top, and brand new holder. And the person, I guess, filed a claim because now it's in an authentic altered slab. So it's just things like that. And then, you see these eights, and you see like a 75 Reggie Jackson. It was a Topps Mini PSA 10, went for like nearly $100,000. It's clearly a seven, but it's in a shiny new holder. So I guess so. And I'm thinking about this, talking to friends, and we're guessing that maybe, PSA is a business, collectors is a business, PSA is one of their businesses. And I get why things are happening the way they are. They have to make money. And, but it's at the expense of us. And when we see these old graded cards and the new graded cards that are held to extremely strict standards, and you're wondering, well, why did this card that was graded 10, 15 years ago in a new holder, and it looks like not as good as my card? And then you wonder, well, maybe it's because of their $250,000 guarantee. So when you submit through PSA, you're buying insurance before the card gets graded and after the card gets graded when it gets back to you. That's the upcharge if it's on the tail end. But when you select the tier, that's, you're buying insurance because they're guaranteeing that if anything happens to the card in the future with a different owner, the card is protected in that case. So all these people, when they're reholdering their cards, they're not going to say anything. PSA is not going to say anything if the cards are inferior or trimmed or damaged most of the times, because every household only has a $250,000 cap. So, and that can go pretty quickly with the ultra modern market. Some of these cards are skyrocketing. Jaden Daniels before the injury, Herbert, even Daniel Jones has a couple high cards. So, and if you're a bulk submitter or a dealer, then you got multiple cards. So $250,000 payout. So we're hurt there. So, if I have an expensive card and I don't want to, I'm not going to get the value of my card if it's over $250,000. Not that I have that, but you won't get it. And at the PSA end of it, they don't want to pay $250,000. It is a problem. So I wish that they would rework that card guarantee, just to be a little bit more friendly to us. And I think that's part of the reason, in my opinion, why grading standards are stricter today than they were yesteryear.
Yeah, and because that changes, Tony, right? That brings in the inconsistency. Upcharges I know was a big topic this year. I'm not a fan of them. I don't think people should necessarily be penalized because they sent an expensive card to a company. Matter of fact, to me, and I've had this conversation with these guys that run these grading companies, Nat Turner, Peter Steinberg, before he stepped down. Like these companies should be, to me, like flattered that they're being trusted with a card of this significance. But they're going to tell you, kind of the company lines that there's going to be more labor intensive, more people looking at the cards, more insurance to cover it, to ship it back. And I get some of that. I just think they can maybe do upcharges and not have them be as steep, if you will,
Hmm.
and whack someone over the head. But I've made those phone calls, Tony, and I might have had this conversation even not recorded with you. I've made those phone calls as a bulk subber to people who sub with me to let them know, like, hey, I got good and bad news, I guess. The good news is this card got this grade. The bad news is it's going to cost you 85 more bucks, 170 more bucks, 350 more bucks. And I'll, in full transparency, every time I've had to make that call, it's went a lot better than I anticipated. People are like, okay, that's cool. But I myself have been upcharged on one card. I'm not maybe I'm frugal, maybe I'm cheap. I'm not a fan of that. What I'd like to
Hmm.
see, I'll bounce this off of you, Tony.
Hmm.
What I'd love to see is kind of like the JSA model, right? When you get an autograph like authenticated by JSA, they're going to charge you based on who it is. So, Bob Feller's going to probably be 30, 40 bucks. I don't have the list in front of me. Mickey Mantle's going to be 150 bucks. Lou Gehrig's going to be 300 bucks. Maybe in these upcharges can kind of be like, hey, if you're grading, a Mantle 51 Bowman and it gets over
Hmm.
this, it's going to cost you this. And maybe they can sort of have a price thing, even when you're entering them in the system. Like, just be aware that if it falls into this tier, this is going to cost you this much. If it goes past that tier, now it's going to cost you even more. A little bit upfront pricing, if you will. I think to me, that would be better, and they would still get more, or even do like a flat rate. Like, hey, a 51 Bowman, and I'm using that card as sort
Hmm.
of the poster,
Yeah,
like an Jordan
because we
rookie.
all
You
because we all had that card.
Yeah, it's right behind me, invisible. You can't see it. But insert whatever iconic card you want, right? Hey,
Yeah.
this card, or even come up with a flat rate. Like, hey, you're subbing a 51 Bowman Mantle. Instead of it being 30 bucks, it's going to be $100, whether it
Hmm.
gets an authentic or it gets a 7. Like, it's
Yeah.
$100. Every mantle that comes through here, we're gonna have to charge $100 for it. Even if it's like turns out to be a fake, that's the risk you have to
Hmm.
like decide you want to take. So I'd rather see that than sort of the upcharges after. And
Hmm.
I know I've talked about it on my podcast before. That's but it's funny because when I've made those phone calls, Tony, like I said, people have been pretty really really good about it, and
Hmm.
probably better than me being on the other end of that phone call. But you're way in there, and then there's a lot of people saying, "Hey, the end is near for SGC." As someone who loves SGC, full disclosure, sponsor of this podcast, someone I use, but I used them before they were sponsors. I always say. I don't want to see them go away. So where do you see that going? And your take on
Hmm.
upcharges.
So, for anything that would make the grading process simpler, more simplified, and more cost effective for both the business, the grader, and us, I just think that right now, with what we're dealing with, it's a strategic game right now. It's like, you want to buy a stock or you want to buy a car, but it's the wrong time of the year to buy the car because maybe it's the start of the summer, and that's what grading to me feels like. We're in a hot market. Cards are, really near the top. A lot of cards have surpassed their even COVID highs. And I'm thinking, well, I got a, Bird and Magic rookie card here, and it's raw. My son picked it up at a show years ago, and I just never thought about grading it. And I'm talking to him about grading, and I'm like, Anthony, sure you want to grade this now? Because if you send it to SGC, Who knows how long it's going to take? If you send it to PSA, yeah, you might get upcharged, but here's the thing. It's just probably like a mid-grade card. But let's say it graded higher. Well, the market's higher right now, so that upcharge is going to be higher today than it may be a year from now. I know it's definitely higher now than it was a year or 2 years ago. So now you have to time in, do I really want to get this card graded now when PSA is going to value it more? And then you got to worry about the comps they're using because that's a whole different story.
You are listening to the Sports Card Nation podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Iron Sports Cards is your number one source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
We are back.
I just want more. I like how grading was. I had one submission in 2004. The only time I ever graded with PSA till I got back into the hobby. It was my childhood cards. I used did a 10 grade, a 10, it was a 10 card sub, and it was a very easy process that I remember, even though I filled everything out on paper. But I still have access to that PSA account, and I'm able to see what I had graded those 10 cards. Now it's just you just kind of pick different tiers. Like I was able to get a 72 Schmidt sign and a 73 Schmidt OPG sign. The OPG card isn't worth anything near the 72 Schmidt. And I had to do I want to send them out? I mean, do I want to get them graded together? Then I got to raise up one value or raise down one value just to get them in the same tier. Or do I have to do two separate tiers? But then I got to pay shipping twice. It's like, yeah, I'll save on the OPG. I would save on the grading level. But then I got to pay more shipping because I'm paying for shipping twice now instead of just the once. So I put them on the same, and I got upcharged for the one card, but the other card I didn't get upcharged because I was nowhere near the value. So it's too complicated, and that's what SGC was doing right. They had two grading tiers. It was simplified, and it just needs to go back to that. But it's a business. Collectors want to go IPO. I think that's it's one of the hobby's worst kept secrets, and they're going to do what any business would do. They have to maximize their revenue, watch the cost, and everything they're doing now is everything I have observed when it comes to a company absorbing another one, and then after a year, you start to see the changes go into effect, and then we're at the cost cutting phase now, and they're still trying to maximize revenue. Maybe we'll see change after the IPO. I'm not sure, but whenever that is. But that's my guess. Where it's going, I think SGC is going to go away soon. And honestly, if it doesn't go away and it just stays as name as itself, we're never going to have the SGC customer service like we had before. PSA does some great things with their customer service. So I'm not just saying SGC's customer service was better, but they would respond via email. If you ran into a problem, it would be easier to get in contact with folks. But again, you're dealing with more folks submitting cards at the same time as you, whether it's TCG or sports. And it's just a mess. But going back to things you hear in the hobby, I don't envision, my own opinion might be dead wrong, but you hear things through the grapevine, like collectors tried to acquire SGC multiple times. There were certain things in the terms that maybe collectors didn't want in the terms, or SGC didn't want. And, maybe one of those may have been a crossover service, where SGC slabs would cross over into PSA. I don't know, but it's not happening. And, when you have someone like me, I had an SGC to De Marzio card. I thought it was, I wanted it in a PSA slab for set registry because in case if I ever sell it, and I got denied with a minimum grade crossover too. But guess what? I cracked that same card out, set it in raw, and I got my two. So I had to pay for grading twice, but I ended up getting my card graded properly, and now it's at the correct grade. So it's just wish things They should just make it easier crossing over from one, because they're under the same company now. But you should be able to cross over SGC to PSA or PSA to SGC, and they should have some process in place just to make things easy. It is what it is, and we just got to live with it.
Yeah, I hope you're wrong with the SGC going away, but at this point, I guess nothing surprises me
That's just my own
anymore.
opinion.
Like,
It's
yeah,
just
and well,
my own opinion.
and you could be right, Tony. You could be
Hmm.
right. I hope you're not. As much as I love you, I hope you're wrong there, because I don't want SGC. But PSA has moved in the building now. You can look at that two ways, right? They're going to coexist and being in the same building. That cuts the overhead down, some cost cutting, or you can look at the other side of that coin, like when SGC's not around, they already have a building and it's them only, right? So I guess it depends who you talk to and the opinion you get. I think one thing I will say, and I think you'll probably agree with this. Whatever, if that's going to happen, it's probably going to happen in the next few months. I think
No,
that's where
yeah,
we're
maybe.
headed. If you look at some of the different things, the different shoes that have dropped, I think it's going to be in the next 3 to 5 months, if not sooner, that would happen if it's going to happen. But I know we talked off the air, if you will, and I had mentioned to you that I've heard whispers that Fanatics was trying to buy SGC at the time as well, which Fanatics, was very transparent when they acquired Tops and the licensing that they wanted to also get into the grading space. I think the rumor was that they had tried to purchase SGC more than once, maybe that's where the whole collectors thing kind of comes in, and maybe
Mhm.
SGC was trying to really hold both of those entities off, and then decided, look, we can't hold them off forever. Let's just take the best deal. And when I heard these whispers from when someone told me that this was potentially going on, I in my own head, I just think if Fanatics owning any grading company to me is a conflict of interest when you're grading your own cards that should be done like that. So had a Fanatics acquired SGC, as much as I love SGC, that would have been the end for me. That would have been, I would have stopped the sponsorship. I would have stopped sending cards that way, just because I don't morally and ethically, I can't support that. So I'm glad that didn't happen. I guess the collectors was the lesser of two evils for me. I just, again, at the end of the day, I hope it doesn't result in SGC not existing no more. And here's the thing that I would say to collectors, and it's nothing they don't already know. And I think they're seeing it already with some of these population reports and the gem rate reports, right? If they phase SGC out, Tony, and you know this as well, and probably most people listening know this as well, there's going to be a number two company. If it's not SGC, and some would argue it's not even SGC now, it's going to open that door for someone else, right? And there are people that say, hey, I don't want to send a PSA. I only send SGC. So those are the kind of people where if you get rid of SGC, those people are still not going to send the PSA. They're most likely going to go, whether it's Beckett, CGC, or another grading company. And again, that's going to open the door. I'm not saying PSA is going to lose their number one footing, but someone's going to be more entrenched at number two than they already are.
Hmm.
And so that's what you're doing if you get rid of SGC. Sure, they know that. I'm sure that's not the only consideration. Comes down to the dollars and cents too. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we sure will. Grading is not a topic I like to talk about. I'm sure it should be fun grading cards. That's the
Yeah,
moral of where I'm getting at. That's the moral of the story, and it's not. And but I will say one thing about collectors: the PSA ticket grading service. I'm hearing great things about it. I went through it myself. I know they're down in Texas now. The head of the ticket grading seems to be a true collector through and through. Maybe doesn't have to worry about the business side of things, doesn't have to report to a board like Nat does. But I'm hearing positive things for my ticket collecting friends, and that's good stuff. So at least that's going on right.
Yeah, things are fluid, man. Things will change quick, and even by the time this comes out, who knows what developed or what new story broke. Things happen
Hmm.
quick, but we're gonna see what develops, who's still around, and what those numbers bear out, and what new plus new technologies. And I don't have a ton of tickets, but I do have some, and I've had good luck, grading those tickets that I've had graded the PSA. So I actually have another one that's on my list to get subbed in there. So we'll see. I got to get that done. So well, let's pivot to somewhere. I don't want to beat grading to death, like you
Nah,
said. You're not a huge fan of like talking about it in this regard. So let's go kind of
that's
the next thing on my list, Tony. And we're seeing, a lot of big cards sell for auction. We're seeing a lot of social media and content creation where people are, posting a lot of their purchases. And, some people will call it a flex. I mean, I post cards, you post cards, but, some people are really like, I don't necessarily play in that upper echelon space. I have a lot of nice cards. Some of them are behind me on camera,
Sam.
but but we're talking about real big boy cards, and some people use the word flexing and that sort of thing. And I guess it doesn't bother me I'll just say this. I guess when it becomes more about look at me, and not and more less about the card and more about the person.
Mhm.
And I think in today's day and age, right, we're seeing these news stories where stores are getting robbed and broken into, and in some cases even robbed in opening hours, and zip tying a store manager and putting them in the back of the store, and then taking what you will, right. We see stuff getting stolen at the National and other shows in broad daylight, right? I'm always leery, and again, I don't even have some of the cards I'm kind of referring to. I'm always leery about posting that too much, right? And I know a lot of people will be like, oh man, he's just showing off, or and that sort of thing. Kind of where do you fall on folks that do this? Again, it's a free country, right?
Yeah.
People can post what they will and want. Um, but it's I think I always try to. I guess I'll say this for in defense of myself. Yeah, I'll post my Jackie Robinson rookie sometimes. It's a 1.5, but I'll post a $30 card and a $40 card and a $10 card that I like too. I try to get sort of run the gamut where it's not all high three figures, four figures, high that kind of stuff. Kind of where do you fall in on this, with some of
Mhm.
these, air quotes flexes here, if so.
I don't really have that problem because my biggest PC is probably Steve Jeltz. And I got Steve Jeltz here in a Phantom display case Nano that I picked up for $15. And it came with a stand for an extra 12. And definitely cost more than the card. And I like to pride myself on being maybe the world's largest Steve Jeltz collector. So I don't have that
No, I
problem.
don't. I don't think there's maybes. I think we can. You are.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah,
unless there's a
but
Steve Jones family member that's just trumping
yeah,
you. But I
yeah.
think you
So,
guys. Even then, I still think you're the guy.
but some people are able. Some people, well, it's different tiers in the hobby of what people do for a living. I mean, so everything we all have in common is we collect cards. What tends
Yeah.
to get different, other than where we live, is our occupation. You got a little bit of salary differences and so on. So the nice thing about cards is you can have a CEO of a company hanging out with a person who just started at that very same but because you share the common passion, and that's sports. What's part of sports cards. So folks want to advertise their collection. They want to show off in a good way. They want to share with the community. It's about having friends and friendships and meeting new people. And yeah, you got to be worried like anything else. Just in the news not too long ago, there was a family not that far, and they got robbed, and someone got hurt really bad because a person who happened to be hired to help on that property saw some antiques that they thought were valuable. So they came back a couple days later, and they robbed the family and someone. So it's terrible. Then you hear stories about the family, a man and his wife in California. I think they got a Babe Ruth ball stolen, a signed ball, along with other things. So it's like what we're told when we go on social media. Don't advertise, so to speak, if you're going on vacation, where you do. So if you want to show off cards, just be aware there may be a bad consequence with that too. But in terms of showing off different cards of different tiers of value and popularity and player, it's nice to be able to show off what we have. And at the end of the day, if you want to display and share with the world what you have, just do it because you love it. Don't do it because you think it's like a stick measuring contest, because that's not what the hobby's about. It's about community, and not all of us have equal means. So that's my thought on that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going.
Oh, sorry. One
ahead.
thing I think you may touch upon is that I have been invited to a couple private groups, like Instagram has them, Facebook has them. So there are some private groups and I recommend that if you're in a group with people who you trust, maybe that's the better place to share, or making your social media page private, than just publishing everything publicly.
Yeah, that's a good advice. And that's sort of where I was going, Tony. I think there's a little bit of like kind of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Oh, this person posted this. Let me one up them with this card. And then it becomes more about like bettering someone than the enjoyment itself of the card. And I know everyone enjoys their cards, or at least I hope so, right? Or what are we doing it for? But I feel like there's a little bit of that going on. Like and it's not just a hobby thing, right? We see that sometimes in the sneaker market. I know we talk even in the watch market, and anything collectible in the art world. I think there's a little bit, that's nice, but check this out. I got you there. And I think that's where it becomes a little personal, and goes kind of against that community grain, if you will. And that's sort of where I sort of fall. And love chopping it up with my man Tony there. And that was, again, part 1. Next Friday, part 2. Again, kind of the year in review, right? Just kind of the year that was. And, we share our personal opinions and beliefs and thoughts, and, no filter other than we don't swear, right? And just kind of give it to you how we perceive it and believe it to be. So hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, hope you come back next week for the conclusion in part 2 of our conversation. All right, now we're going to have our Hobby is the People announcer of the week and wrap up this week's episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
Hey guys, this is Dylan from YouTube, Double D Vintage Baseball Cards, reminding you that the hobby is the people.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.